Super Retro Force.
I recently finished Tales of Legendia, and now I want to talk about this black sheep of the series. I've been playing Namco Bandai's Tales of series for over 20 years, and it's become one of my favorite gaming series of all time. And that's why I'm reviewing each and every game in the series. Now it is time for Tales of Legendia. Tales of Legendia was released in 2006 for the PlayStation 2 and is the 7th mainline game in the franchise, returning to a 2D battle system after Symphonia, which was incredibly successful with its change to 3D. Tales of Legendia was developed by an entirely different team, Project Melphas, composed of developers from Tales Studio, along with members from both the Tekken and Soul Calibur series. This made for a very unique experience, different from any other Tales game, but was it any good? Let's get into Tales of Legendia and talk about the story, the gameplay mechanics, the positives, the negatives, how it aged, and ultimately, if it's a game worth picking up and playing. So strap yourselves in, grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's get to talking all about the 7th Tales game, Tales of Legendia. Tales of Legendia follows the story of Senel Coolidge, an Alliance Marine who washes up on the ancient ship the Legacy with his sister Shirley. Speaking of the Legacy is a giant country-sized ship that has connections to a highly advanced ancient civilization, whose population consists of the Ararenus, known as the people of the land, and the Farinus, the people of the sea. The Ararenus and the Farinus constantly have tension with one another, which is a major aspect of the plot of this game. Shortly after landing, Shirley gets kidnapped by a bandit named Moses, forcing Senel to unwillingly team up with the sheriff of the local town, Werej's Beacon, and a female knight named Chloe in order to rescue her. This is the majority of the game, chasing Shirley around as she's a damsel in distress. During his search to rescue Shirley, Senel is joined by several characters, all with their own reasons for adventuring throughout the Legacy. Funny thing about these characters is all of their names come from writers and literature throughout history. Your characters are separated into two main classes. You have Iron Aaron, or melee fighters, and Crystal Aaron, which focus on spellcasting. But enough of that, let's get into the characters. So I've mentioned Senel already. He is an Iron Aaron who uses his fists. Senel is named after Cuban writer Senel Paz. I've also mentioned Shirley. Shirley Fennis is a Crystal Aaron, or spellcaster, named after English writer Charlotte Bronte. Then you have the Sheriff of Werej's Beacon, Will Reynard. He casts spells while wielding a giant hammer. Will is named after William Shakespeare. Next, we have Chloe Valens, a sword-wielding knight from the prestigious House of Valen, named after the character Chloe from the 1947 novel Front on the Daydream by French author Boris Vian. Then, Norma Beatty. Norma is a treasure hunter. She uses a straw and blows bubbles. Seriously, who thought of that as a weapon? Norma is a Crystal Aaron who focuses on healing spells and is named after American author Norma Field. Remember that bandit that kidnapped Shirley at the beginning of the game? That's Moses Sandor. He joins your party basically to atone for his mistake. He uses spears and javelins, and his name comes from the Romanian writer Moses Gastor. Jay is the ninja of Tales of Legendia. Fun to play and is incredibly cynical and constantly uses cutting remarks. He is named after American author J. McInerney. And lastly, you have Grune. She is a strange spellcaster who has amnesia. Not much is revealed about her until almost the very end of the game. Grune uses magic water jars and is the only party member with no relation to literature. Each of these characters complement one another incredibly well. While some of them are incredibly unlikable at the beginning, looking at you, Moses and Jay, later on, they all redeem themselves and become absolutely wonderful. Honestly, I feel like the characters are what make Legendia. They all have incredible growth and become amazing and fun. The story, honestly, it isn't the greatest thing in the world. It's more or less a damsel in distress simulator, but that's only half the game. After you finish the first half of the game, you have the character quests that start. The main quest is essentially one really long character quest focusing on Senel and Shirley's story. But after that, each of the remaining 6 characters get their own dedicated chapter. These chapters specialize in character growth for that specific character and resolve any loose ends with that specific character's story. Think of it kind of like the World of Ruin of Final Fantasy VI, but more than just a dungeon or two and a cutscene for each character, you have a whole extended chapter for them. I really enjoyed having this growth because you had all these amazing characters, but then you get to see all the depths and emotional triggers for each one of these characters. Jay's was probably my favorite because he was very mysterious up until this character quest, and Moses. Well, that's one of the most heartbreak moments in the entire Tales series. During each of these chapters, you get a tidbit of more information about this mysterious individual, and it all ties together, leading to the true final boss. While the main quest was only okay and cliche, the character quests add an incredible amount of depth to the story, and I would say honestly, it amounts to an amazing and enjoyable story. We all know that story is only half the battle. After all, what's a good story without some fantastic gameplay to go alongside it, right? So let's talk about that. Remember how earlier I mentioned that Tales of Legendia went back to basics? When Symphonia switched to a 3D battle system utilizing multiple lines, Tales of Legendia uses the XLAMBS, or Crossover Linear Motion Battle System. Personally, I am a huge fan of the 2D Tales battle systems using games like Tales of Eternia or Tales of Destiny 2. Tales of Legendia leaves much to be desired. I'm not sure if it's because Legendia wasn't developed exclusively by Tales Studio, or if they did what they could to make it incredibly similar to a fighting game, but for some reason it feels as if it just isn't complete. The best way that I can explain it is it feels like a very slightly refined Tales of Fantasia. So as I mentioned previously, your characters are separated into two main groups. You have Iron Aaron, such as Senel and Chloe, who are more melee fighters. They can chain regular attacks into base areas into arcane areas. Iron Aaron can also combine techniques to create a custom attack. These are different for each Iron Aaron. Chloe, for example, can create a counterattack where she maintains a stance for a moment, and if attacked, will retaliate. Customizing these only makes them more effective against certain enemy types. Senel, on the other hand, his main gimmick is throwing enemies. Each enemy is assigned a weight class, ranging from feather to massive. As Senel levels up, he gets different throw attacks. They're all essentially the same, but can throw enemies up to a certain weight class. But certain enemies have a special weight class, and that's where Senel's customization comes in. You can combine Senel's techniques to create a special throw that will throw a certain type of enemy and lower a stat. I won't lie, I found custom areas to be incredibly useless. Not only are they incredibly specific, but they cost incredibly high amounts of TP and are by no means worth the cost. Secondly, we have Crystal Aaron. Crystal Aaron are your spellcasters and can have spells ranging from attack spells, like Fireball, to healing spells, like Cure, or stat buffs or nerfs, like Deep Mist. Spells are incredibly effective in Tales of Legendia, so chances are you are really going to want to have one or two Crystal Aaron in your party. Where your Iron Aaron just need to level up to earn attacks, your Crystal Aaron are a little bit different. When you get up to a certain level, you will earn an Eris Scroll. In order to use that Eris in battle, you will need sculptures from your enemies. Sculptures are earned per enemy type, and once you get the designated amount of sculptures, you will learn that spell. Personally, I found this a bit meaningless because it just added a bit of pointless grinding for farming enemy sculptures. Or even worse, there are times where it's impossible to learn spells if you progress too far in the game and a specific enemy type is no longer available. I'm glad this series never revisited this system. Lastly, let's get into some other battle mechanics. Mystic arts are a staple of the Tales series, aren't they? Tales of Eternia has some cool ones. Tales of Symphonias, while almost impossible to use half the time, were also pretty awesome. So Legendia has to have some fire ones for sure, right? Nope! For some reason, Tales of Legendia doesn't have any Mystic arts. In fact, Legendia actually had voice lines recorded for them, but they were never used. They even have a story scene that should have resulted in learning Mystic arts, but it didn't happen. It seems almost like Mystic arts were planned, but they didn't get implemented in the final build. Thankfully, when Tales of the World Radiant Mythology 3 came out, the Legendia cast did get Mystic arts. So, it's better than nothing. What Legendia does have instead of an overlimit or mystic arts is climax mode. Climax mode is dull, to say the least. As you attack, you fill up a gauge. Once this gauge is full, you can press L1 and the screen glows blue. During this, enemies are frozen in place and you're free to combo to your heart's content. If you press L1 before the gauge empties, you do a combo attack that does big damage, but it's kinda pitiful, pointless, and most enemies will be dead before the gauge empties, including bosses. I found myself completely forgetting it existed half the time, and only using it for bosses just to quickly end the fight. Before we move on, I want to quickly mention the dungeons. The dungeons are long and have frequent random encounters. Like, these dungeons are longer than they need to be, but they feel very repetitive as well, without much diversity to them. They're essentially just a long hallway, and they always make you manually run out of them. However, their one saving grace is puzzle rooms. Every now and then you will find a green teleporter like the ones on the world map. When you enter this teleporter, you will enter a room and pick up the Sorcerer's Ring, another staple of the Tales series. These puzzle rooms are the only real puzzles in Legendia. I'm glad we got something. Puzzles are something I miss in JRPGs these days. I know a lot of people don't like puzzles, but Legendia does something great with them. If you struggle with any puzzles in the game for a bit, be it teleporter puzzles, mazes, or these puzzle rooms, eventually one of your party members will ask you if you just want to skip and bypass the puzzle. You do get a title if you do them all yourself, but this way you won't be stuck for an extended amount of time and get frustrated. Good job, Namco. Good job. Outside of battle, it's a very typical Tales game. You have one hub town, Huerta's Beacon. This is where most of the story sequences take place. I was kind of disappointed at the lack of adventure. Sadly, you don't go around visiting other full towns. There are a couple other towns, but they're more one and done. You don't spend much time in them, and they're more or less just there to progress the plot. Again, just very lacking. Part of my personal favorite part of Tales games is visiting the various towns and meeting all the different townspeople and having meaningful plot points. Tales of Legendia is lacking that by focusing on a single town. Alright, so we've talked about the adventuring, we've talked about the battle system, but what about side quests? Side quests are not very common in Tales of Legendia. The first and pretty much only side quest for the first half of the game is the game's cooking system, which really isn't much of a side quest. As you adventure throughout Legendia, you will find the Wonder Chef, or rather, the Wonder Baker. Mimi the Wonder Baker is hidden as strange items throughout the world. Every time you find her, you learn a new bread. Yes, not cooking, you learn bread. These can range from toast, to cake, to even flan. Once you learn a new type of bread, you can go back to Huerta's Beacon and bake that bread. This bread can restore HP or TP, and you can level it up and learn new, better types of bread by baking the same one repeatedly. Honestly, it's just the same old cooking system as current Tales games. Once you finish the main quest and enter the character quests, a few new side quests open up. The first one I want to talk about is the customization shop. You can submit items to create new items, like better armor or better weapons. I do not understand why it takes over 40 hours just for a simple mechanic to unlock. Having that from the beginning of the game would have been nice, and it could have added a bit more depth to the game, but as you can tell, Legendia makes some pretty questionable decisions. The other side quest would be the arena. The arena is like any other Tales arena. It features a series of battles, and eventually leads to a special battle. I won't spoil what this battle is, but it's something you would never expect. That's essentially the entirety of side quests in the game that it has to offer. I guess not having a large amount of side quests lets you focus on the story, but I would love to have something to feed into the lore of the world of Legendia. Oh well, Legendia gonna Legendia, I guess. So, graphics, voice acting, and music. You can have great gameplay and story, but if the game isn't presented in an enjoyable way, does that all really matter? Sure, the art style of the characters are great, they're wonderful, but Legendia as a whole uses this weird 3D chibi art style, and it just looks odd. However, thankfully the world is bright and beautiful, and I just love the battle transition animation. I'm not judging it on standards that are way out of this world, and I would give it a break because it is a PS2 game. However, when you compare it to other PS2 games like Final Fantasy X or Grandia 2, Legendia just doesn't have that oomph or memorability when it comes to how it looks graphically. It's not incredibly offensive when it comes to visuals, but honestly, it's just average. As for the voice acting, it's solid. I don't have any real complaints about the voice acting. Now keep in mind, there's only English voice acting, there's no Japanese in this game, so if you want the Japanese voice acting, you'll have to import the Japanese version of the game. It's enjoyable and well done though. For the first time, skits are voiced and they breathe new life into the character development. Actually, you know how I said I don't have any complaints? I do have one complaint. Remember how I said that there was one negative about the character quest that I had? The first half of the game is full of voice work. Nearly every story scene is brilliantly voice acted and really increases the impact of the emotional moments. However, once you hit the character quests, the voice acting stops dead in its tracks. Once you finish the main quest, there is not a single line of voice dialogue. This is terrible and makes the last half of the game feel incredibly soulless. I also believe this is why people consider character quests post-game content, because it seems like not as much effort was put into the character quests as it was the main game. It's a shame too, because the character quests are probably the best part of the game despite the lack of impact that the scenes give. Alright, so music. Legendia is an interesting beast when it comes to music. Traditionally, the Tales series has had one composer, Motoi Sakuraba. I don't have to go into talking about Motoi Sakuraba, I've clearly fanboyed over him enough as it is. However, Tales of Legendia was incredibly different in several aspects, and that includes the music. Tales of Legendia was composed by Goshina, also known for games like Tekken, Mr. Driller, and Klonoa 2. This was a much needed change at the time. While I love Sakuraba and he has composed some of my favorite gaming music of all time, the soundtracks were starting to feel all too similar, so introducing a new composer really gave Legendia some originality. You can easily hear the difference between the two composers. While Sakuraba is more in your face with his music, Shina's Legendia soundtrack is much more relaxed and gentle. It's up there as one of my favorite Tales soundtracks. While we're talking about the soundtrack, I just want to bring to attention some of the strange musical numbers in Legendia. There are a few scenes where the game turns into a musical. The main one that comes to mind is the Bantam Bouncer theme. It's incredibly weird, but kind of a bop, honestly. Almost makes me want a full-on Tales of musical game in the future. Even if it is a side game, I would be all for it. Come on, Namco. Am I alone on this? Probably. But I feel like it would be amazing. So, how long are you going to spend with Legendia, and does it respect your time? Well, Tales of Legendia is a beefy game. The main quest can be about 45 hours long depending if you grind or if you just try to explore a little bit. And then the second half of the game, the character quests are about another 35 to 40 hours. For this playthrough, I had clocked in just short of 95 hours. Considering most Tales games are no longer than 50 to 60 hours, Legendia is longer than most. While long games aren't bad, I won't lie, by the end of the game, I just wanted it to end. The story is good, but the lack of voice acting kinda kills the enjoyment and ruins the pace. I played lots of games from before voice acting was a thing, but when you have great voice acting and then it all of a sudden stops, it totally kills the vibe of the game and motivation. That being said, the story and gameplay balance is great, so pacing isn't an issue, it's just the feeling of, okay, I am ready to move on to something else now. Overall though, outside of the weird feeling of the last half of the game, it's nicely paced, and if you like long games full of story, Legendia is well worth the investment. So there you have it. Is Tales of Legendia the best Tales game out there? I'm gonna say no. And while it is considered the black sheep of the series for several reasons, I still feel it's an enjoyable game worth playing, especially if you love the classic 2D style Tales games. Have you played Tales of Legendia before? If so, what did you think about it? And if not, are you interested in giving it a shot? Let me know in the comments below, And hey, if you enjoyed this video and want to follow along as I review every Tales game in the series, as well as content on other JRPGs, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, ding that notification bell, and make sure to check out this video that I'm sure should be right down your alley. This has been Shanky, thanks so much for watching, and as always, have a wonderful day.